libertador que hablan representando el Ministerio de Educación.
Muchas gracias, buenos días. Bueno, para mí es un placer y una alegría volver a mi casa. Hace 7 meses de forma, espero que momentánea, en la que volveré seguramente más pronto que tarde. Y es un placer compartir mesa con 2 amigas con las que he trabajado mucho y muy estrechamente durante el tiempo que permanecí en la universidad, con la vicedecana general de la Facultad de Ciencias de Salud, Carmen Gallego, y con la vicerrectora de Docencia y Organización Académica y Títulos, Marilu Martín Pérez. En segundo lugar, quería disculpar la no asistencia de mi directora, de doña María Rodríguez Moneo, que por problemas de ultimísima hora que están teniendo no ha podido acudir. Y la verdad es que es un tema que le apasiona, que sabe, que realmente pues, ella es psicóloga y este tema realmente lo ha trabajado. Es uno de los principales especialistas que hay en España sobre las competencias claves ahora, y lamenta realmente no haber podido estar con todos vosotros. En tercer lugar, pediros perdón, porque la intervención mía va a ser un poquito más larga. Me he dado cuenta que en el Ministerio nadie me hace caso y cuando daba clase me escuchaba. Podía soltar, hablaba mucho, siempre digo, viene para hablar poco, pero luego a la hora de la verdad mis discursos son más largos de lo que me corresponden, y es por esa necesidad de, pues a lo mejor como profesor, de hablar y de poder transmitir lo que quiero. En las cambiantes sociedades de hoy en día, la necesidad de un crecimiento inteligente, sostenible e inclusivo se ha vuelto más importante que nunca. La crisis económica, los grandes flujos de información, la complejidad de la sociedad digital, la movilidad sin precedentes de personas y las olas de inmigración, el surgimiento de nuevas desigualdades sociales y los cambios culturales son parte de la realidad a la que Europa en general y España en particular tienen que hacer frente. Esto requiere de una ciudadanía que se adapte rápidamente y que posea las habilidades necesarias para aprovechar las nuevas oportunidades y realidades. Las orientaciones de la Unión Europea insisten en la necesidad de la adquisición de las competencias clave por parte de la ciudadanía como condición indispensable para lograr que los individuos alcancen un pleno desarrollo personal, social y profesional que se ajuste a las demandas de un mundo globalizado y haga posible el desarrollo económico vinculado al conocimiento. Así se establece desde el Consejo Europeo de Lisboa en el año 2000 hasta las conclusiones del Consejo de 2009 sobre el marco estratégico para la cooperación europea en el ámbito de la educación y la formación, la conocida Estrategia 2020. En la misma dirección, el Programa de Trabajo del Consejo Europeo, Educación y Formación 2010, definió desde el año 2001 algunos objetivos generales, tales como el desarrollo de las capacidades para la sociedad de conocimiento y otros más específicos encaminados a promover el aprendizaje de idiomas y el espíritu de empresa y a potenciar la dimensión europea y la educación en general. Por otra parte, más allá del ámbito europeo, la UNESCO en el año 96 estableció los principios precursores de la aplicación de la enseñanza basada en competencias, al identificar los pilares básicos de una educación permanente para el siglo XXI, consistentes en aprender a conocer, aprender a hacer, aprender a ser y aprender a convivir. De igual forma, la Organización para la Cooperación y el Desarrollo Económico, desde la puesta en marcha del programa PISA, plantea que el éxito en la vida de un estudiante depende de la adquisición de un rango amplio de competencias. Por ello, se llevan a cabo varios proyectos dirigidos al desarrollo de un marco conceptual que defina e identifique las competencias necesarias para llevar una vida personal y socialmente valiosa en un Estado democrático moderno. La definición y selección de competencias, el DESECO del año 2003, definió competencia como la capacidad de responder a demandas complejas y llevar a cabo tareas diversas de forma adecuada. La competencia supone una combinación de habilidades prácticas, de conocimientos, motivación, valores éticos, actitudes, emociones y otros componentes sociales y de comportamiento que se movilizan conjuntamente para lograr una acción eficaz. Se contemplan, pues, como conocimiento en la práctica, es decir, un conocimiento adquirido a través de la participación activa en prácticas sociales y, como tales, se pueden desarrollar tanto en el contexto educativo formal, a través del currículo, como en los contextos educativos no formales e informales. En España se incorporaban al sistema educativo no universitario las competencias claves con el nombre de competencias básicas. La Ley Orgánica 2/2006 de 3 de mayo, de Educación, conocida popularmente como la LOE, hacía ya referencia en su exposición de motivos, entre otros asuntos, a la necesidad de cohesión social, al aprendizaje permanente a lo largo de la vida y a la sociedad del conocimiento. Introduce el término de competencias básicas por primera vez en la normativa educativa. Fue uno de los mayores retos a los que se enfrentó nuestro país, no solo porque esas competencias identificaban por primera vez el perfil del nuevo alumnado, sino porque superar ese reto requería un serio esfuerzo de cooperación de todos los agentes educativos. La Ley Orgánica 8/2013 del 9 de diciembre para la mejora de la calidad educativa, conocida como el 11, va más allá al poner el énfasis en un modelo de currículum basado en competencias. En España, estas competencias claves son 8, como todos conocen: la comunicación lingüística, competencia matemática, competencias básicas en ciencia y tecnología, competencia digital, aprender a aprender, competencias sociales y cívicas, sentido de iniciativa y espíritu emprendedor, y conciencia y expresiones culturales. Las competencias se conceptualizan como un saber hacer, que se aplica a una diversidad de contextos académicos, sociales y profesionales. Para que el de distintos contextos sea posible, resulta indispensable una comprensión del conocimiento presente en las competencias y la vinculación de éste con las habilidades prácticas o destrezas que la integran. Así pues, el conocimiento competencial integra un conocimiento de base conceptual, conceptos, principios, teorías, datos y hechos, un conocimiento relativo a las destrezas, referidas tanto a la acción física observable como a la acción mental, un saber hacer, y un tercer conocimiento que tiene una gran influencia social y cultural y que implica un conjunto de actitudes y valores, un saber ser. Estamos asistiendo actualmente a profundos cambios en el sistema educativo español, en todos sus niveles de formación, que se han traducido en el desarrollo de nuevas leyes educativas y al paralelo proceso de modificación de la escolaridad obligatoria. Estas nuevas leyes, la LOE y la 11, nuestras leyes, la LOE y la 11, orientadas al desarrollo integral centrado en competencias, a la calidad educativa y a dar respuesta a las demandas socioprofesionales actuales. Estamos en un proceso de cambio y al mismo tiempo de oportunidades para mejorar la oferta formativa, siendo la educación obligatoria un contexto apropiado e idóneo en el que los docentes tenemos una vía de acceso directa para conseguir dicho fin. Seguro que esta jornada, como ha señalado mi profesora de la palabra, permitirá ahondar y profundizar en el conocimiento de estas competencias claves e interiorizar más la importancia del nuevo paradigma de la educación por competencias y asumir cómo la inteligencia social es una competencia básica para los estudiantes que da respuesta a las necesidades educativas especiales y la atención a la diversidad en las aulas escolares, poniendo de manifiesto que el desarrollo de la inteligencia social en las aulas, como han señalado los profesores Zautra, mejora no únicamente las competencias individuales, sino las competencias interindividuales dentro de un entorno social determinado, como se verá a lo largo de esta jornada. Por último, quiero señalar que esperamos que esto no sea el inicio de una estrecha colaboración entre la Universidad Rey Juan, que ha sido mi casa, y el Centro Nacional de Innovación e Investigación Educativa, que es actualmente mi casa, de una colaboración estrecha para trabajar y ahondar la inteligencia social en una metodología que entendemos desde nuestro centro que es muy válida para trabajar con grupos de personas con las que estamos directamente implicados, que son alumnos con necesidades educativas especiales, alumnos en riesgo de exclusión social, inmigrantes, población gitana, etcétera, etcétera. Fruto de esta colaboración que ha señalado anteriormente, no sé si la decana, no solamente es esta jornada, sino que muy brevemente sacaremos una publicación conjunta sobre la inteligencia social y esperemos en un futuro poder hacer módulos formativos para que los profesores de las diferentes etapas educativas puedan formarse y prepararse en la inteligencia social. Muchas gracias por invitarme, muchas gracias por escucharme y confío que seguramente esta jornada será...
Ahora sí. Bueno, pues en primer lugar, buenos días a todos. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí hoy. Quiero comenzar agradeciendo a la mesa, pues por supuesto a la rectora Marilu Martín y a la decana de la facultad que hayan asistido a la inauguración de estas jornadas y a Félix Labrador por estar aquí con nosotros representando al Ministerio y por por todo el trabajo conjunto que hemos estado haciendo para que esto haya podido realizarse hoy. Me gustaría además dar la bienvenida, como ya ha hecho la decana de la Facultad, Carmen Gallardo, a Alex y a Eva. Thank you very much for coming. Y me gustaría, antes de explicar por qué estamos aquí hoy, agradeceros a todos y cada uno de vosotros vuestra participación en el programa de inteligencia social, porque veo muchas caras conocidas. Hay muchos alumnos que han participado en la experiencia y hay otros que al contarle el proyecto pues están directamente colaborando con nosotros y el resto que no lo estáis haciendo estáis aquí, con lo cual creo que eso ya es importante. Me gustaría utilizar 5 minutos brevemente para explicaros el porqué de las jornadas de inteligencia social, ¿no? Creo que es una oportunidad, es la primera vez que se hacen unas jornadas de inteligencia social en España, en la Universidad Rey Juan y además en la Facultad de Ciencias de la Salud. Y el comienzo de este proyecto viene porque Alex Zautra, os explicará, es un profesor de psicología clínica, va a exponer en su currículum, con lo cual no quiero reiterar en el aprendizaje que podemos hacer de él, pero ha pasado mucho tiempo trabajando en emociones y en resiliencia y yo pedí una estancia postdoctoral para irme a conocer el trabajo que estaba haciendo. Y tuve la gran suerte de llegar y encontrarme un maravilloso proyecto de inteligencia social que estaban aplicando. Cuando volví a la universidad decidí poner este proyecto en marcha en el ámbito universitario y dada la docencia que tenía y los diferentes grados en los que colaborábamos, pues intentamos adaptar el programa que se va a exponer aquí hoy dentro de el contexto de cada grado y en las diferentes asignaturas que teníamos. La experiencia ha sido maravillosa y bueno, creo que hoy podremos explicar esos resultados. Mejoramos en inteligencia social, mejoramos en bienestar psicológico y me parece que trabajar en la competencia en inteligencia social puede, como muy bien ha explicado Félix, ser una competencia transversal en diferentes grados y poder generalizar lo que hemos aprendido. Me gustaría finalizar única y exclusivamente mencionando que para mí trabajar con Alex y con Eva ha sido una oportunidad de crecimiento no solamente profesional, sino personal. Y os invito a que disfrutéis de las jornadas, que hagáis todas las preguntas que queráis. Intentaremos contestar todas. Evidentemente la presentación y conferencia inaugural de Alex y de Eva va a ser en inglés. Las diapositivas han sido traducidas y son dos personas que tienen una inteligencia social maravillosa, tienen mucha sincronización y creo que su inglés se entiende perfectamente. No obstante, si tenéis cualquier duda, pues tanto la profesora Lilian Velasco como yo estamos de apoyo. Para si queréis realizar preguntas podemos traducirlas y sin más, reitero mis agradecimientos por estar aquí con vosotros hoy, porque habéis venido y muchas gracias a la decana.
Yo creo que parte de toda la información de la jornada ya la tenéis. Yo no me voy a extender porque voy a participar después de la jornada, por lo tanto no voy a, en otro papel diferente, como coordinadora de la Red Española de Universidades Sagradas, pero sí que quiero reiterar a toda la mesa, sobre todo gracias por haber estado aquí esta mañana. Para nosotros es importante que el Centro de Innovación Educativa haya podido estar colaborando y organizando un tema que nos parecía interesante, novedoso, que queremos que tenga futuro y sobre todo nos parecía que la vicerrectora más relacionada con el tema de competencia en el día a día en la universidad, porque realmente toda la parte de ordenación, docencia, es ella la que de alguna forma tiene la responsabilidad, delegada por el rector, también pudiera compartir por lo menos la presentación en el caso de la jornada. Posteriormente nosotros le podemos enviar parte de las conclusiones, el estudio que se ha hecho y por supuesto cuando tengamos el libro para que ella lo conozca. Queremos apostar por el tema de inteligencia social, tanto es decir que queremos realizar un convenio con el Instituto de Inteligencia Social desde la Universidad Rey Juan porque creemos que en este momento, y es verdad, somos la única universidad que tenemos posibilidad y lo estamos haciendo trabajar en este tema, y creo que si apostamos por ello debemos de ser, nunca mejor dicho, innovadores y poder, pues yo creo que darle a nuestros alumnos que tengan algo más y que va a servir para su desarrollo profesional. Sin nada más, le dejo la palabra para que inaugure la visita.
Sí, bueno, como les he dicho antes, seguro que van a tener interesantísimas conclusiones que después podemos aplicar. Y nada, simplemente para no llegar a más, decir que quedan inauguradas las jornadas de inteligencia social en la Universidad Rey Juan.
So I'll be speaking in English, I'm sorry. But the slides, some of them, or at least most of them, no, at least half of them, will be in Spanish. My name's Zautra, my wife Eva.
Hola.
And this is Lillian. Some of you know her. She's working closely with us at the Spanish contingent, which is Carmen and Lillian and her group. Have done some of the most amazing work in social intelligence, and we're just happy to be here to be part of it. So I'm sort of the spokesperson, at least one of the spokespeople, my wife, other. And then we want you to join in. We hope you have plenty of questions for us. So I kept our talks as brief as possible, but you know, academics love to talk. So we'll talk some, and then we'll invite you to have questions later. We're delighted with the introductions. Thank you, Felix, and the Ministry of Education, and also the university. And Carmen's mother, also, is she still here? Oh, okay, she's out there. But she'll be coming back later. So, to connect a little with what Felix said earlier, economics are social also. We gain financially by having good capacities, social. We gain health and happiness through social connection. So we feel like when we talk about social intelligence, we are talking about competencies more generally also, which begin with the person. I mean, the person, you, me, all of us, are fundamentally social beings. That's how we start. And the value that we gain from early attachments and connections with mother and father, with our sisters and brothers, with our friends in school, and later in life, define who we are, for better and for worse. And so we'll be talking about that. I don't know about Spain, but very much. I'm learning. I love your country. We've been so delighted to be here. But we come from the United States where there are many social problems. I don't know if you have the same ones as we do or to the same degree as we do. But there's a crisis of humanities. And so what we've done, built on the research, evidence on social and health psychology, the research evidence, but also what we've learned from philosophy as well, is that we need to humanize our social relations better. Yesterday, President Obama's office released a new report and a demand from the universities across the country to engage in better attention, really better regulation and attention to sexual violence on campuses. Now, I don't know if this is a problem, but it is in the United States. And violence between people begins at home. Okay? It begins with the slightest sort of disaffection, disconnection, disregard for one another, and it grows exponentially when it's allowed. Okay. But how do you stop it? We think it begins with good education. Okay. And one of the education programs we're going to talk about today, the one we're most excited about, is in social intelligence. Now, okay, so there's a problem we need to address. The research evidence, for me, it's been, well, I've studied psychology, I taught psychology for the past almost 40 years now. And more recently, studying people with chronic pain, but also studying the community and communities of people and how they're able to be resilient from health problems and other problems that they have in their lives. Resilience, the capacity to repair oneself and to grow stronger as a function of coping well with stressful events. I came to the conclusion that resilience is fundamentally not belonging to the individual's grit alone. It's fundamentally a social capacity. The ability to connect, to find oneself with others, to develop strong and enduring lasting relationships. Those that can form us and how we are to behave, and to move us to greater psychological growth. Okay. And so as Carmen said, she's learned from me, I've learned enormously from her. And so has my wife. I've learned enormously from my wife. And she maybe has learned a little bit from me, I don't know. All right, so Lillian's going to help me here, because I have my slides here in English. So it's my crib sheet, you know. You know how it is? You need the notes on the side.
Cheat sheet.
Cheat sheet, okay. I don't know how you translate that into Spanish, but in the United States, the kids always bring some a little extra along, and that's mine. So I'm going to change my slide, and then Lillian will do the same for you. Okay. So, first of all, let me start with a definition of social intelligence. Because in the literature that you read about social intelligence, it's defined primarily as a social skill or a social competency, but it's devoid, usually in the literature, devoid of value. What I mean about that is it's talked about social intelligence is the capacity to, navigate your social relations. Okay? Well, that's fine, but it's not far enough, because we need to also include the value, the motivation to, the desire to connect, and to see the utility, the gain, in not just manipulating one another. Okay? In fact, one of the most beneficial experiences you can have in your life is to spend a day thinking, I will not manipulate another person. Because the value of social intelligence is not just the skill, but it's also understanding the use, the meaning of a connection, of enduring, lasting social relationship. So think of it in that way, both the navigating and the changing from perspective, rather than just about you, okay, or just about me, okay, it's about us. It's changing your perspective, your way of viewing the world. It's not all located within yourself, okay, but located more broadly, both in each connection you have with another person and more broadly with your community. So that's what we do in our definition of social intelligence. And it's different, related, but different from emotional intelligence in that way. Because emotional intelligence is a lot about being aware of your feelings, and most of our feelings are about other people and ourselves in relation to them, and being able to regulate our emotions that we have most about ourselves in relation to other people. But emotional intelligence still puts the focus on ourselves, whereas in social intelligence, we ask you to switch your attention to the connections, the relationships, not just about who we are in those relationships. So, let me move forward. Now, I guess we're going to save questions to later, okay? And I'm not sure how well I'm able to communicate, because I don't know how well you understand English. Okay? I'm hoping it's okay. I know the slides are hopefully, usefully communicate at least some of what I said. Did you already switch it? No. I began talking about this already, about the disconnection, okay, where in the United States, loneliness is endemic. It's a long-standing, troublesome part of our society, where 15 to 30% of Americans are lonely every day, and 24% have no one to talk to, and 80% of all crisis calls come from people who have no one. Disconnection. In the States, someone recently reviewed 72 separate studies looking at longitudinally the change in the degree to which people espouse the value of empathy and perspective taking. 34% drop in perspective taking. Perspective taking defined here is I sometimes try to understand my friends by imagining how things look from their perspective. And 48% drop in empathy, a drop in caring for one another, okay? Having tender feelings for other people. Okay? That's in our country, and I don't know what it's like in Spain. Okay? But this drop has been precipitous and accelerating over the past 10 years. A lack of connection, a disengagement from caring. The disregard from others is about, in the common phraseology in the United States, is bullying, okay, where one person gets mistreated by another. I don't know if this happens in your country, but likely it does to some degree. It certainly happens a lot in ours. Over 50% of the American population, school kids, they get bullied at one time or another. 1 out of 7 get repeatedly bullied, they get picked on. Now, some violence is reported in the United States lately, frequently. Eruptions of violence in schools, guns. That's partly a problem. Certainly responsible is the ease with which Americans can gain access to violent weapons, but it's also a function of, perhaps in some degree, the degree to which they were treated themselves and the degree to which they treated others, and let that disregard for one another grow and accentuate over time in relationships. And everyone is a potential target, young versus old, black versus white. So, we came to the conclusion we need to find a better way, and we need to educate others to do that. And we built the social intelligence program, some of which I'll talk about, and some of which my wife will describe in greater detail. It's built foundational on social neuroscience and social psychological and cognitive psychology principles, also clinical psychology. So I'm going to give you some of those principles now. All right, so the first principle is everybody is unique. Now this may seem like everyday language, experience of readily accepted understanding about how we understand one another, but the truth of the matter is unless we think about it, we often don't treat one another as unique and special. Okay. We sometimes just treat another person like, well, we think they think like we do. We expect them to behave and have ideas like we have. And if they don't, then there's something wrong with that. Okay. So the idea here, the principle here, and to gain humanization, we have to begin with this principle that everybody is unique. What follows from a principle like this is that in order to connect with another, we have to toggle back and forth between our perspective and the perspective of another person, yes? Right? We have to not assume that they know what we're thinking, okay? Or that we know what they're thinking. Otherwise, see, if we just build our relationships with another person based on our expectations, they'll be foolhardy expectations, because they won't be based on what on what we know about them. They'll be based on what we assume or presume that they're thinking. But we have to focus our attentions on them. We have to first come to the understanding that they're different. So, and we allow that difference by looking for them to see their perspectives as well as our own. A second principle built on cognitive psychology. Daniel Kahneman in particular, but many cognitive psychologists have forced upon us the understanding based on social and neuroscience that our brains are built to be very economical. Okay? We can't possibly be aware of everything that's going on around us. So, in fact, 95 to 99% of what we think, we perceive and see and behave are purposeful, are often simply really automatic behaviors, automatic thoughts. Okay? Predispositions, expectations. In fact, when I look around this room, my expectation of what I see really drives most of what I actually see. Only a small percentage of what I see is based on my own awareness. Our brains are built to do this. We have to do this in order to be able to have the economy of thought, to focus our awareness on that which is most important. So most is unaware. A little part of what our brains are doing is allowing us conscious thought. This is an important principle, and it's very often overlooked in psychological sciences because we tend to think of ourselves as aware beings, sentient creatures. We are indeed aware beings, yes, but mostly we're not. Okay, mostly we're like all the other animals in the world. Of course, I don't know if you have pets as dogs. You have dogs as pets. Our dog, Blackie, the great black lab, is a sentient being. Okay? He has consciousness, or she has consciousness. Yes.
She does.
She does. Now, do you know what I'm talking about? Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. See, some of you do, some of you are not able to understand English. This is a problem. I'm sorry. I don't understand Spanish. It's my problem more than yours. I'm in your country. You understand what I'm saying? Yes. Maybe not. So, but you do understand the slides. Yes. Okay. We'll go on. Have any of you heard my voice before today? You have. Not many. Next slide. So, the economizing of the brain means that many of our thoughts and beliefs are built on expectation. They're built on shorthand language, stereotypes, okay? Called heuristics in the language of cognitive psychology. They're built to provide brief, quick judgment. Okay? But these are also biases to some degree. They're not wholly accurate. As any shorthand language is, it's always going to skip something. Okay? So here we have, there's a group of biases here. Some of you recognize. Okay? Yesterday, Carmen delightfully sent me a picture of myself giving a talk. And I said, who is that old man up there? Because I see myself as I'm speaking now, young like you guys. Okay? I don't see myself old with white hair and mustache. Okay? But just like this muscular guy here, you know. Is he muscular? He believes himself to be. Yes. That's how he sees himself. It's called the self-serving bias, among other things. Okay? There are other biases on the screen, or shorthands. And the way the brain works, so we shouldn't think of them as just wrong, okay? They're just brief ways of looking for it. Like the angel versus the devil, okay? We see people as black or white, okay? Either good or bad. We don't understand the grays, all the in-betweens, which really define our human nature. Don't be afraid of change. We tend to economize by wanting to see things the way they were, and not really altogether that accepting of things being different. But in order for you to learn, you have to be curious. You have to allow yourself to say things aren't just going to be the way they were. I want to learn a new way. Them, we'll talk more about them later. Them is, well, that used to be an old science fiction thriller. It's about aliens invading. But them reminds me to say to you that what we do have is biases built on in-group and out-group prejudices. That is, we place people in our in-group, okay? And those people we understand and believe to be right. And those who are not the members of our in-group, for you, okay, you know, you're young, the old don't necessarily know what they're talking about. Okay? Me, I'm old, so I think the young, they have no wisdom. Right? But nevertheless, these biases we need to overcome. There's shorthand ways of understanding one another. In our country, black versus white, a big prejudicial problem that runs throughout the politics and the inhumanity within our cities and on the countryside. Because white people feel like they're superior and know more than black people. And if you ask a black person who's knowledgeable and honest enough to tell you that indeed they have prejudice as well against white, which both ways. Men versus women as well. Men think they're in charge. Women think they ought to be in charge. and so on and so forth. These are useful ways of thinking, but there are shorthands that need to be looked at in more detail. So when we judge one another, we judge based on our biases, our shorthand knowledges of things, and a lot of these understandings and judgments we make toward one another, toward ourselves, toward each other. We have to be more, in our program we say, by understanding the unconscious and the automatic behaviors, we have to, it allows us to be more understanding of ourselves and others. That is, if we see prejudice against us, you know, is the person really intending to be prejudicial? When we say ourselves, misjudging another person, do we really intend to be? Okay. Likely not. Likely much of the mistreatment we see from others are not intentional. And that begins the capacity for change and conversation to make things. Well, we have some built-in parameters here. You see the person in the bubble. Okay. We do walk around through life as if we're like we're encased in a bubble, built upon our expectations what's forward. You also see in this picture people mimicking the behavior of others. We are built-in mimics of one another. We have the neural capacity to mimic with mirror neurons. We do that and connect well with others by being able to be like them to some degree, even without knowing them. I know, I'm not saying what's on the slide. Okay. But that is, that's okay, honey. So, now, we can change course. We may be headed down the main road of automatic behavior, but once we're aware, we can change off that course when we need to. Third principle is humanization. Now, this really is fundamental to everything we talk about in social intelligence. It means that, well, people are not objects. Our person next to you, we're not constituted by just a set of body parts. Okay? They're not chess pieces to manipulate them before. Each of us is human. Okay? We have to honor our own humanity in our relations with others, but we will benefit from honoring the humanity of the person we're talking. Humanity is fundamental to social intelligence. Okay? It's not about a prisoner's dilemma. Okay? It's not about trying to find the right answer in a game of life. It's about social connection. It's about treating one another with humanity. To do so makes us happier, yes. Makes us live longer, yes. Our cardiovascular, immune systems, all our neural functioning, all function better in treating one another with humanity. Economically, people prosper with this showing the shorthand. They may manipulate another for short-term gains, for long-term gains, economically, socially, physically, are to adapt in this principle of life, treating one another with humanity. Lastly, to be social is a choice. Okay? It's a choice we make every day. It's not something we do automatically. Okay? But the point I want to make here about choice is we tend to think of ourselves as choosing humans. But remember, our partners, okay, our friends, members of our community, members of our political party, and members of the other political party are making choices. They're human, okay? And choices define our humanity. Define who we are and who we're going to become. In fact, once you make a choice to become the kind of person you wish to be, your brain will take over and make it happen. Okay? That's the way the brain works. It will bring into bear all that automaticity, all that unconscious processes, the power of the mind to change and become the person you wish to be. But you have to make the choice, and you have to do it. If you're going to, everything. So, these 4 principles I talked about guide the development of this online intervention education curriculum, built on 7 months, okay, and about 50 sessions, each 5 to 10 minutes long. Details of which my wife will talk about, because she is the inventor actually. So, next slide. These are the first 4 modules. Neuroplasticity begins the conversation. And neuroplasticity means that our brains are not formed and structured and set in stone at age 4, or for some who study adolescent psychology, age 17 or age 25. Indeed, my brain is still changing at age 66, sorry, set. But it's changing in positive ways. It's trimming and pruning, okay? But it's also building new connections, as I allow it to do by allowing myself to be curious and willing to accept things to be different than I expect them to be. That's how we start the program, and it's a great lesson for everyone to know that they're not fixed. You're not set. Even your personality is not set in stone. Okay? It can change. The rest follows from that. So, of course, Module 2, unconscious processes, leads to Module 3, which is mind reading, which means taking the perspective of another person. It's necessary, okay, in order to connect with them. Module 4 is about them, which I introduced before earlier, which has to do with in-group, out-group differences in our country, prejudices, very powerful, stereotypes, very powerful, biases between and among groups, rule in large measure. So we need to begin to break that down and see how they are manifest, and also how a person can begin not to exhibit biases in the people, even if they're aware of them as being automatic. Of course, and being able not to excuse, but to be understanding the biases and prejudices that are forced upon them by other people's views. Okay, so the last 3, conversation, the ebb and flow, a synchrony in relations between people is fundamental to good social connection. And you know what this connection looks like, you know? So, but connection, good connection, requires some effort on the part of both people to be in sync. All right, so many of you are heavily involved in social media, Twitter, Facebook, other means of communicating, email. Are these satisfying ways of communicating? Yes? Could your social networks ever be larger than they are today? Our social networks that we grew up with, my generation, much smaller. Yours are much larger. My son is 29, has 250 people on Facebook. Okay. You maybe have even more. The question is not whether this is good or bad, but how that technology influences your social relations. I think probably both, good and bad. Depends how you apport yourself, how you would relate to your social network. You know, like I was saying, our way we work with and be with one another is built on expectation. Our expectations is based on history. Our history begins when we're born, maybe even before. and it grows and develops and changes over time. But it is based on past experience. We can be open to new experiences, but we have to know we begin somewhere. And whatever our past experiences have led us to be affects us today. And we're not rooted in our past, we're not fixed in our attentions to the past. We can change, and our futures are open to us if we choose them. Those are the 7 modules of the program. And like I said, my wife will develop these further in her talk. I want to give you some brief view of where we're headed with our training program. Some of the best work is being done right here in Spain. Okay. Absolutely. The things we're interested in doing, and we're beginning to do in the States, includes work in corrections, and working with people who have been arrested for violent crimes. Okay. So not so serious a crime as to place them in jail yet, but to place them in programs where they have been getting anger management training, but now we're giving them the option for social intelligence training. Because the new way of thinking about the problems of people who exhibit violent behavior is that it's not just, or even mostly, a power expression, but it's mostly an expression of insecure, anxious, and troubled attachment from early in life that's built and shaped by their experiences and their capacities to bully others and to get away from their own problems inside. Okay. So, corrections is one place. Schools, another place. We have one school we're working with where only the most highly intelligent high school students in the whole state of Arizona go to this. Their IQs average 145, which I'm sad to say is higher than mine. Okay. Nevertheless, they don't have any more social intelligence than any other child, and some have less. Okay. So the school system, the principal of that school has recognized the need for their kids to learn socially intelligent behavior too. Okay. And so now they're getting our program, and we'll be evaluating the effectiveness of it. There are other ways, public policy. In our country, the Republicans don't listen to the Democrats. The Democrats don't listen to the Republicans. The Democrats, like us, don't believe the Republicans are real human beings. The Republicans don't believe the Democrats know what they're talking about. The inhumanity in our public institutions is growing, and we need to interrupt that. And certainly our veterans in the United States coming home from wars in Afghanistan and Iraq have forgotten humanity, except to their comrades. They come home to their families and children, and they're lost. Okay. And they need attention. They need to reintegrate in their communities. We're helping them with that. Another program we're beginning is with people with social problems because they have a history and troubles, mental health problems. So they're seriously mentally ill, and also those with substance abuse are now rehabilitated, but where are they? Can they find their way in communities again? So we're helping them by giving them attention to what is it like? What are other people really like? How do you relate to them now that you're well, okay, but you still need to find a way, well, to make friends and sustain those relationships. I'm going to just say briefly about this complex slide. Is one of the grants that we've asked to do is one that involves helping people at midlife, okay, who are entering into retirement, but not quite yet, okay, helping them by giving them a social intelligence program, particularly for those who report early childhood experiences that were troubling, abusive relationships in childhood. Abusive relationships in childhood are still there for those people 40 to 50 to 60 years old. They're still there, and they're affecting their social relationships today. And those social relationships that are troubled affect their health and happiness. Okay. We think we can interrupt the cycle, okay, the tragedy from their early childhood that's still placing them at risk for health and mental health problems when they age. Okay. Most manifested at age 50, 60, 70. Okay. We can interrupt that and change the nature of their social understanding, which began with distrust, to lead them to trust and understand one another, can interrupt that cycle and make them potentially healthier and live longer than they would have otherwise without the program. We're excited about that. And the other set of problems we're attaching is that, you know, whole communities need sometimes to be uplifted. Whole school systems, okay? So, whole universities, okay? Whole organizations. So we're working with life care facilities right now to begin to develop a way to uplift the culture so that they treat one another, staff to staff and staff to patient, with greater understanding and respect. So, I'm going to summarize. This is as far as I'm going to go today. Okay? But in summary, I'd say that that's the way I put it here is strengthening the social fabric of our countries. Okay, is not only the right thing to do, okay, but it's a healthier way. It's a way towards social health, and social health is really fundamental to physical and mental health. So, thank you very much.
I'm his wife, I'm Eva. We live in Arizona, in the United States. Raise your hand if you've ever been to Arizona. How about the United States? Carmen's been there. Yeah, I've been to the States. Arizona's hot, really hot. I met my husband 6 years ago on Match.com. Do you guys have that here? It's an internet meeting site. I met him on the internet. And we've been married for 4 years now. He's the love of my life. Love you, babe. So today I'm going to talk about, I started the Social Intelligence Institute from a personal point of view. And yesterday, Carmen asked me at lunch, Eva, how did you get involved in social intelligence? And I said, you just have to wait till tomorrow. I'll tell you the whole story. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you how we got involved with it, or how I got involved with it, actually. And then I'm going to give you an example of the training sessions which we put together. And then I'm going to give you our beliefs about why this works, why internet training works. So what happened was, I'm a business person, I'm not an academic. I have an MBA and my history is in healthcare. I was a hospital administrator for 20, 25 years. And then I got into marketing communications, and I like to do pictures to tell the story. So my husband was doing all kinds of interventions, and he'd say, come in and make this better, put some pictures with it. And I would go in and do that. And then he got this job, is it a job? I guess it's a job, from the Army, from the U.S. Army, to try to figure out how soldiers can become less lonely. And in Afghanistan, the lonely soldiers were committing suicide. And so our task was to help lower that rate. We had never done anything like this before. I had never thought about this. He did work in arthritis. He did work in mindful meditation. But good grief, how do you keep kids from committing suicide that can't connect to their people? And we had a very short period of time to do this, and we had no idea what we were doing. We didn't know how to do this. But this thought of the lonely soldier just stuck with me and stuck with me because I realized during that project that I was a lonely soldier. I was the lonely person that couldn't connect with people. I put on a mask, I survived. I was good in business, but I didn't have real connection with people. I didn't feel joy, and I would look at other people that were happy, and I would say, they're kidding, they must be joking, this really doesn't happen. So to me, seeing this lonely soldier, it blew me away, and I knew that that was me. For the first time, I knew that that was me. So, How many are familiar with The Matrix? The movie The Matrix? Raise your hand. This is my favorite movie. Morpheus says, you know, take the blue pill and you can continue to see things the way you've always seen them. You know, just forget about it, do things the way you used to do it. If you take the red pill, then you're going to go down a rabbit hole and you're going to hear and feel truths that you never have before. So from that lonely soldier, I took this red pill and I went down this rabbit hole in a huge way, and that was about 3 years ago. Blew me away. So what I started doing is, because I'm not an academic, I started reading all these journals, these psychology journals, sociology journals, philosophy, and every article I would read was like an aha moment. It was like, oh my goodness, you know, these researchers are saying things in the third person, you know, the subject does this and this and this, and I go, oh my goodness, you know, I started looking at it from a first person point of view, that this is what I do, and this is what I think, and if I do this, things will change. So I read and I read and I read and I read, and I'm a PowerPoint person, so I like to put things in visual order. So I started putting all these aha moments into order. And one of the things I learned is that belonging and loneliness is, belonging is a natural state. And when you're lonely, and when you feel that ache of loneliness, that is your body giving this chemical reaction saying you need to get out there and connect with someone, because it makes you unhealthy. So I learned that from the research. And I realized that I wasn't flawed because I was lonely, but everyone feels this. And the biggest thing that I learned was about attachment theory. Raise your hand if you know attachment theory. Are you guys psychology students? Yes?
Some.
Okay. Do you study attachment theory in psychology? Yeah. So this is the first I had heard of this. And reading this was like, oh my goodness. This is me when I'm a year old. That was, I'll be 60 in October. So that was me a long time ago. And I wish I had my glasses, I can't see very well. So from attachment theory, my mom was 15 and my dad was 20 when they got married and had me. And I realized from attachment theory that I wasn't unlovable at all. It was that my parents didn't know how to bond with me. They didn't realize that our little brains, when we're born, are only 25% developed. And they develop very quickly the first 3 years, up to 95% of your brain develops during that time. And everything that they say and do forms your little brain. And that includes social relationships. So if your parent, your primary caregiver, which in that case was my mom because my dad was never around, she didn't know how to look me in the eye and coo and do all those things. When your mom does this cooing and you look at each other back and forth, that's synchrony, and that's how you learn to have conversations with other people. And we know now from the research that in the first 6 or 7 years is when you learn how to give your heart to someone else. That's when you give your heart to your caregiver. That's when you learn to love someone else. This all happens in the first 6 or 7 years. I didn't have that. I didn't know that that was even possible. So now from the research, we know that 60% have this secure attachment. They have the parenting that they have those skills to have relationships. The rest, at 40%, have trouble with this. So this little picture of the girl drawing the template, our brains are like templates. They form connections based on what we know and what we learned as a child. I just didn't have that. So I had to make sense of my life. This is my mom and my dad. I had to be able to put all of this into words without emotion and to understand my mom and my dad. And since I did this, that's my sister at the bottom. I never had a relationship with her. And now we laugh, we feel joy. I have connections with family, with friends. So this program has, or the research, which I really do appreciate the research you guys do. What I don't appreciate is that you guys don't let this research get out into the public and help people like me. This is what this program does. It takes your research and gets it out to the people who need it. I was really angry about that for a while. Why aren't you telling us? You know? So that's why I made the program, so we can tell other people. So some other aha moments is that I learned about the automatic behavior, and I learned that when people do things, it's often unintentional. I always took everything to heart. You know, what are they doing to me? Are they just being mean on purpose? Now I look at the situation in many different ways through their eyes to see if it was intentional or not, so that I can handle it a different way. This is a big one. That's my son up at the top. He's 21. His name is Ian, and he goes to ASU, and he studies physics and math. If I had known what I know now about the teenage brain, I would have been a much better parent. I was still a good parent, believe it or not, but I found out that teenage brains aren't fully formed until they're 26 years old. And I found out that they take risk, and they take risk depending upon whether other people are around. So kids are affected, the things that they choose to do are affected by who else is with them. I found out that the teenage brain, some of the connections don't allow them to read my face like I'm feeling. For instance, my son would look at me and say, "Why are you so angry?" And I'm not angry. He's just reading my face different. So now I know when I talk to my son to be very clear as to what my emotions are, because he's not reading my face right. About 50% of teens will look at a face and say that it's angry when it's really not. So there are a lot of different things that parents need to know about their teenage kiddos, which is up to 26, so that's most of you. I also learned about what my husband was talking about different perspectives. I had no idea about this, and it's so funny because even my friends they all seem to think, well, you think the way I do. I mean, they don't even understand that other people can think differently. And this is something that I use every day, so I make sure that I do understand what other people are thinking, and that we make it clear. It doesn't have to be the same, but you can't connect with someone unless you understand what they're thinking and how they see the world. Our president, Obama, who I adore, by the way, talks about how the Americans have a real lack of empathy, and he said this several times, and I would go to all the people in the psychology department. They're probably really sick of me right now, but I would say, what is empathy? And everyone would say, oh, everyone knows what empathy is. I didn't know what empathy was. Us people who are not in psychology don't understand these words and what these words really feel. So I go down the rabbit hole again, and I start studying about cognitive empathy, and that is the perspective taking, seeing how another person sees it. And emotional empathy is I feel your pain. So I had a real problem with this because when other people are hurting, do you hurt too? Does your heart hurt for them? And I would say, most of the time not for me, to be perfectly honest. When my son would hurt himself, it would hurt me physically. So I understand the difference between these things. Now that I'm becoming more socially intelligent, though, I do feel someone else's pain, which I didn't feel before. And there's a compassionate empathy. Like I was always feeling, what is wrong with me? I don't go feed the homeless. There's something fundamentally wrong with me. But now I understand that people have different ways that they're moved to help other people. And that we all don't have to be Mother Teresa's, that we all don't have to feed the homeless, but we all have our ways. And we're not flawed characters because we don't do all of these things. And then emotional contagion was a really interesting one for me. In my family, the level of hysteria, when people would get mad, they would just start arguing, and it would just get worse and worse and worse. And I learned that emotions transfer from one person to another. The research, that's what we do. We transfer emotions. When you go to a football game, everyone's excited. That's emotional contagion. That's great emotional contagion. When we have political fights, everyone just gets all ramped up. That's emotional contagion. I was noticing, I was watching the choir the other day, and people were singing together, and they all looked so happy. The emotions were just flowing from one person to the other. So now I know I can see emotional contagion when it's happening, the bad stuff, and I can try to figure out a way to, number one, not get involved myself, and number two, how to calm it and to guide it. And also I can allow myself now to feel happy with other people when I'm at a football game or a baseball game. I noticed my son not too long ago went to a baseball game with us, and he said, Mom, I don't feel what other people feel at this baseball game. I want to get excited with the rest of them. So that was an interesting thing for me, why he didn't feel that. Brain categories. Our brains are meant to be efficient. Our brain categorizes everything. And one of them is an us versus them type thing. And I can take an example of my father, who I used to think was one of them. And now I realize that there are complexities. Every time I meet someone and I know someone, I realize that the people are complex. They're not good or bad. They're complex, and actually I've become curious about them more now. But I could go on and on about brain categories, because that's why we have prejudice and all this other stuff, which is a natural thing for us, but we just have to know how to deal with them. But for me personally, because I'm talking about personal, this is how it affected me. Boy, those little neurons are, I've never seen that happen. That's pretty cool. So, you know, the big thing with this program, it's all neuro-based. We teach the neuroscience of brain connections, and the status quo bias is so interesting because your brain connections are connected until you unconnect them. And that's why people are afraid of change, because it is very difficult to break those connections. But now I realize that. I used to say, you know, why do you keep doing the same thing over and over? Well, I understand now, and I'm more patient with them. My mother, for instance, we had to move her into an assisted living, and oh my goodness, it's so difficult to do. Before I would have been very impatient. Now I'm patient with people who have difficulty in changing anything. And finally, I finally realized, that's me in the bubble before, I finally realized that I am nothing by myself. I realized that I am in connection with other people, with my husband, with other people, because it's not just me anymore. It's a whole different way of seeing myself in the world, is with other people. And it's a conscious choice that you make every day. It's a conscious choice that you make every time you meet someone else. It's a conscious choice if you're at the grocery store and you're buying something and you never look the cashier in the eye. And you make that choice every time. So you connect with people in many different ways. You connect with them in a brief little eye contact at the grocery store, or you connect with them in intimate relationships like with your spouse. It's all about that, and it's not time dependent, it's brief. So that's my story. So I took all of that and I thought, I cannot possibly be the only person who doesn't know this. So we started teaching this at ASU, and I started doing some studies, and we found out that the course that we put together, the neuroscience makes it a little more difficult. So 7th grade is about the lowest level that really understands this. 8th grade is perfect, and on up, university students and adults. So the training is the research and some exercises. It's about thoughts and feelings and beliefs, and it's on the internet. So they're brief little sessions. I have a hard time seeing. And I can't see now. So it's little research vignettes. It's about 5 to 20 minutes. We take a lot of things from YouTube, try to keep it entertaining. There are about 40 sessions. We have writing exercises on there. We have little homework things. Go home, do this with your family at home, do this with your friends, see if it works. We have research papers that I told you that I learned from, so the students can read these papers either online or download them and read them later. We have a badge incentive program so that if they finish a module, they get a badge, just like if you play Bejeweled or something, you know how you get points. We have an avatar who's the speaker now. It used to be my husband's voice, but the people in the United States don't like his voice because I guess it's too soft or something. I'm not sure. So now we have a British avatar voice. We're going to try that out. And it's all on a Moodle LMS platform so that we can track all the students, how far they've gone and what they're doing. So this is an example of the last module, or the last session in them. We have gone through many different examples of, you know, bystander effect and all kinds of us versus them inhumanities that we do to each other. So this is one of them.
These past few sessions appear to paint a rather unattractive picture of us humans. We readily identify with them groups and out-groups, assigning greater value to those in our own group, and reacting with bias against people who are different from ourselves. Many of our opinions of groups different from our own are fully formed by age 6, and the groupings are so arbitrary. Something as simple as a flip of a coin can place us at odds with each other, treating others with indifference, even cruelty, as we classify those on the outside, not as humans, but as objects. Scary stuff. Does it have to be this way? Are we so inclined to see the world as us versus them? A dog-eat-dog world? The answer is no, but you have to consciously work at it, because you need to overcome some competing forces. First, we automatically band together into groups. This is a good thing, because it provides much-needed human connection and sense of belonging. However, it also leads to an unconscious fear of people who aren't in our groups, people who are in our out-groups. Second, our brain processes people who are not like us in a different place in the brain. for our brains to process information about people who are similar to us. But when they are different, it requires much more of our mental effort. Thus, it's more difficult to understand their point of view, and, at the extreme, it's even difficult to see them as human. Understanding the power of out-group bias is an awareness most people don't have. It puts you in the position of thinking and acting with more wisdom than ever before. Now, you'll be able to see others with less bias, acknowledging differences, but not letting those differences hold sway. And, unlike before, you'll be more alert to situations that encourage people to misunderstand one another. Situations that have the potential of turning human relations into a runaway train wreck, whether it be bullying in school or at the office, or serious inhumane treatment exhibited in the Stanford study. In addition, you now understand that biased behavior toward others is usually the result of unconscious processes and are rarely intentional attempts to treat others poorly. Thus, some patience and understanding may be in order when you see others react with prejudice. And finally, you now have enough knowledge to take a leadership role, quietly guiding others to find a better way when the situation demands it. Give an example of how out-group bias influences your life. How do you handle it? Can you think of a better way to handle it in the future? What's your new strategy?
So there's this, for every session we have a little bit of the research, and then we have a reflective question that they actually take the research and apply it to their life and they write it down. Then we also have, this is the little kind of homework assignment. It's a whiteboard animation. This is brand new for us. We are just starting to make these, so we'll see how it works. Working on in our Spain group here, we're hoping we get a lot of feedback, and you guys, if you are interested in helping us come up with these interesting things for kiddos, help us. We can use your feedback. So our beliefs on why this works, which it does, we now know. Carmen will tell you about it. But my husband travels all over the United States giving speeches, and we sit around and we talk to these academics at Purdue and Cornell, and it's so funny because they're all psychologists and they all say people can't change, which just doesn't make any sense to me. People do change. They can change, but they have to believe that they can change. There's a psychologist named Carol Dweck out of Stanford that did this. She talks about these two ways of thinking. People who believe that their traits are fixed, that your personality is fixed and will not change. There are those kind of people, the ones we met at Purdue and Cornell, and that there are the other kind of people who are like us, who believe that our basic qualities can change, and that it can change through effort and through education. We believe this can be taught. And people who do believe this, or who do believe that you can change yourself, you're more open to learning, you're more willing to confront challenges, you're able to stick to difficult tasks, which we have a huge problem in the States of getting kids to, keep on going, even if it's hard, keep on going. And you're capable of bouncing back from failure. And so Carol Dweck did this study of teenagers in 7th and 8th grade, and she was tracking their math scores. And when she had them go through a workshop of about 8 weeks, knowing that your brain changes, knowing about the brain connections, knowing the neuroplasticity, everything that our program is based on, when they understood that, over 2 years, their grades improved, and you can see that in that top line up there. Just knowing this alone. It had nothing to do with study skills. It only had to do with knowing that you can change and you can learn with effort. So we began our program with neuroplasticity. We had it at the end and moved it to the front. Oh, can you play this? So this is in our first little session.
If you have any idea how awesome your brain is, it is very awesome. Simply put, neuroplasticity means your brain can rewire. So this means whatever you want.
Anyway,
it actually affects you. If you have any idea how awesome your brain is, it is very awesome. Simply put, neuroplasticity means your brain can rewire itself. This means whatever.
That's okay. Well, let's move on. Anyway, we teach people that really anywhere you want to go, you can do it because your brain goes with you. We now know that these interventions have lasting effects. There's a Professor Greg Walton at Stanford who talks about these as wise interventions. And when you just do simple little things, they have long-lasting effects. For instance, he did this study on marriage, and marriage quality tends to go down over time, unfortunately. And it was a controlled study, and he had them over the internet talk about perspective taking, and if someone were looking at their most serious argument, so they say, what was the most serious argument you had over the last 4 months? And they would say that. And they would say, if a third party was looking at this, what would they say? So they just started teaching these married couples about perspective taking. And you can tell by that blue line that it changed the quality of their relationship. It still went down a little bit, but it had a huge effect on the quality of their relationship. Just understanding an internet-based thing on perspective taking alone. And this is over 24 months here. But he writes about wise interventions all the time, and that they do have a long-lasting effect, that they just kind of build on each other once you know these simple little things. Internet training works because the biggest question people ask us is, why on earth do you have internet training when it's about social relationships? This isn't a social skills thing. It is about a belief change. So you can teach anything on the internet about a belief change. You don't have to have someone in front of you to shake their hand. So we think it can all be done on the internet. Here's another study that it's about cognitive behavioral therapy for, this is for the social anxiety. Yeah, these are two groups of people who have social anxiety disorder, and they had half of them in face-to-face cognitive behavioral therapy, and half of them were on an internet program teaching them the same thing. And the blue line on the bottom is the internet program. The other one was face-to-face therapy, group therapy, and the internet one was no face-to-face at all. Sorry about that. Sometimes, you know, it's a little bit scary for clinical psychologists. Yeah, I'm sorry. Anyway, we know this kind of stuff can work if we do it right. We also know that participation rates are as good on the internet as they are in face-to-face. I mean, people say, oh, well, people won't stick with it with the internet. Well, they don't stick with it with face-to-face either. At least it's the same engagement rate. That's all I have to say.
Las sociedades modernas han configurado unos sistemas educativos como expresión de su voluntad de transmitir a las nuevas generaciones unos conocimientos y valores que consideraban básicos y en ocasiones propios y diferenciados de otras sociedades. En los últimos tiempos, los cambios de distinta índole de la sociedad y de las demandas que ésta plantea a los sistemas educativos han originado a su vez un cambio en el paradigma educativo. Está cobrando presencia y valor una formación más integral que pretende promover y garantizar la adquisición de unas competencias básicas, ahora denominadas clave, por todo el alumnado y que en concreto se preocupa por la formación de los alumnos-alumnas como futuros y futuras ciudadanas y ciudadanos. El análisis de esta realidad ha guiado a los equipos que han integrado los diferentes estudios y recomendaciones que se han realizado en los últimos años. Por ejemplo, el de SECO que he mencionado en mi presentación, publicado originalmente en inglés en el año 2003, a incluir las competencias sociales y cívicas como una de las 8 competencias básicas en que debe estructurarse el espacio educativo europeo, tal como propone la Estrategia de Lisboa. Como resultado, la inclusión social y la ciudadanía activa ocupan un lugar preponderante dentro de los 3 objetivos estratégicos de los sistemas educativos y de formación europeos adoptados por el Consejo Europeo en marzo del 2001, que abarcaban la calidad, el acceso y la apertura de la educación europea al mundo. Ya en 2004, la Comisión Europea identificaba el desarrollo de la ciudadanía europea como una de las principales prioridades de acción de la Unión Europea. En línea con este interés, el Consejo Europeo declaró el año 2005 como Año Europeo de la Ciudadanía a través de la educación. Además, la UNESCO promovió activamente la idea de la educación para la ciudadanía a escala global a través de su decenio de las Naciones Unidas para la Educación en la esfera de los derechos humanos, que ocupó los años 95-2004. El propio Consejo Europeo ha venido desarrollando su proyecto sobre educación para la ciudadanía democrática, de la que recientemente me ha nombrado, con mi sorpresa, coordinador de España de este proyecto. Y bueno, multitud de disposiciones, normativas, recomendaciones que no os quiero aburrir, sobre las competencias clave para el aprendizaje permanente. En España, como he señalado en mi presentación, se incorporó al sistema educativo no universitario en la LOE del año 2006, la cual introduce por primera vez el concepto de competencias básicas en la normativa educativa. La recientemente aprobada LONCE va un poco más allá al poner el énfasis en un modelo de currículum basado en las competencias. No os voy a leer la ley, se introduce un nuevo artículo, el 6 bis, y aparece una disposición adicional 35ª sobre la integración de las competencias en el currículo. Dado que el aprendizaje basado en competencias se caracteriza por su transversalidad, su dinamismo y su carácter integral, el proceso de enseñanza-aprendizaje competencial debe abordarse desde todas las áreas de conocimiento y por parte de las diversas instancias que conforman la comunidad educativa, tanto los ámbitos formales como los no formales o no formales. Su dinamismo se refleja en que las competencias no se adquieren en un determinado momento y permanecen inalterables, lo que implica un proceso de desarrollo mediante el cual los individuos van adquiriendo mayores niveles de desempeño en el uso de las mismas. Además, este aprendizaje implica una formación integral de las personas, que al finalizar la etapa académica serán capaces de transferir aquellos conocimientos adquiridos a las nuevas instancias que aparezcan en la opción de vida que elijan. Así, podrán reorganizar su pensamiento y adquirir nuevos conocimientos, mejorar sus actuaciones y descubrir nuevas formas de acción y nuevas habilidades que les permitan ejecutar eficientemente las tareas, favoreciendo un aprendizaje a lo largo de toda la vida. Con esto se inicia una nueva política tendente, entre otras cosas, a incorporar este enfoque pedagógico en las prácticas de enseñanza de los centros educativos. Una pretensión de estas características tiene consecuencias en todos los componentes del currículum, como así se refleja, por ejemplo, en el Real Decreto 1513/2006, que regulaba las enseñanzas mínimas de la educación primaria, el Real Decreto 1631/2006, que establece las enseñanzas mínimas de educación obligatoria secundaria, o el recientemente aprobado Real Decreto 126/2014 sobre el currículum básico de educación primaria. Desde este punto de vista, y de acuerdo con las investigaciones centradas en el cambio educativo, para que un nuevo enfoque pedagógico se transforme en una realidad en la vida cotidiana de los centros, son necesarias acciones a varios niveles del sistema, de forma simultánea. Acciones relacionadas con la normativa y con otros documentos de concreción de dicha política, actuaciones de información, formación, asesoramiento y acompañamiento por parte de la Administración educativa y acciones promovidas por los centros, elaboración de documentos, información, formación, debates, etc. Desde el punto de vista curricular, por otra parte, cada uno de estos niveles de actuación se encuentra atravesado por una serie de prácticas que lo definen y lo configuran de forma dinámica y compleja. Dentro de este cruce de prácticas se encuentra el nivel político-administrativo, desde el cual se tomaron las decisiones para implementar este cambio educativo. No obstante, estas decisiones se marcan en una tendencia a la convergencia europea al respecto y en un discurso en torno a las competencias que adopta un rasgo cada vez más globalizado, transnacional. En este contexto, y haciendo suya las recomendaciones de la Comisión y el Parlamento Europeo, que he señalado al principio de mi intervención, la LOE y la LOMCE incluyen 8 competencias básicas que no repetiré, denominadas a la clave. Su inclusión ha pretendido ser una verdadera propuesta de cambio, al menos en algunos aspectos esenciales, un cambio de paradigma. Al igual que cualquier otra propuesta de cambio educativo, la incorporación de las competencias básicas o clave como enfoque pedagógico lleva su tiempo. Como es lógico, va mucho más allá de su prescripción normativa y de su inclusión en los documentos de los centros educativos. Que las competencias básicas o clave se transformen en un enfoque pedagógico significa que pasen a formar parte de la cultura de los centros, de los significados y de las prácticas que en estos tienen lugar y del mismo pensamiento pedagógico del profesor. En el campo educativo, las propuestas de cambio suelen estar focalizadas, en primer lugar, en el currículum. Este suele tener una gran importancia para los gobiernos y las políticas educativas, y ha estado en el centro de las distintas reformas que estos han propiciado en al menos las últimas 2 décadas. En este sentido, hace algún tiempo que el currículum es para los gobiernos, como ha señalado el profesor Jimeno, entre otros, un dispositivo privilegiado a la hora de encarar las reformas educativas, pues lo emplean como medio para organizar las intenciones educativas asociadas a un contexto de demandas diversas, donde coexisten tendencias reproductoras y productoras, creativas e innovadoras. Es aquí donde debemos ubicar la nueva dimensión que se ha dado a los currículos, a la enseñanza y al aprendizaje, con la inclusión de las denominadas competencias clave. Por su parte, el tema de las competencias se presta a dilemas y debates de diversa índole. Ni siquiera su concepto ha logrado un consenso claro. En mi presentación os he señalado la definición de seco, pero no toda la comunidad científica está de acuerdo en la definición de lo que son las competencias. Ha logrado un consenso claro y unívoco. En cualquier caso, desde el punto de vista curricular, las competencias como enfoque pedagógico son mucho más que un asunto de definición conceptual. Desde las teorías del cambio educativo, es posible que lo más complejo en un escenario educativo concreto sea transformar el enfoque de competencias en algo que contribuya a la mejora de la educación. En este sentido, es necesario que seamos conscientes de que toda propuesta de cambio, en cierto sentido, interpela al currículum anterior, en este caso al currículum centrado en las disciplinas y los contenidos. Los rasgos que definen un enfoque por competencias demandan nuevos formatos, una visión que trascienda la lógica disciplinar. Por su parte, desde el punto de vista pedagógico, el enfoque de competencias exige cambios de miradas y de formas de hacer. En este sentido, la educación actual, tal como ha sido institucionalizada, el peso de su historia y la coexistencia de demandas y tradiciones diversas e incluso contradictorias, es interpelada por este nuevo enfoque pedagógico. En el caso concreto de las competencias social y ciudadana, está plenamente vinculado a la formación integral de las personas, a la construcción de una identidad personal y comunitaria, y seguramente es la más vinculada con la inteligencia social. El conjunto de características de las alumnas o alumnos influye poderosamente en el proceso de aprendizaje escolar. En esta competencia se recoge, además, el desarrollo del sentido de pertenencia al género humano, desde una doble perspectiva: la espacial, las distintas escalas, desde la propia localidad a la humanidad en su conjunto, y la de defensa de los derechos humanos universales. Una de las bases que se asocia al aprendizaje a lo largo de la vida consiste en formar alumnos y alumnas conscientes del modelo democrático de la sociedad en la que viven. Deben ser conocedores de sus características, diversidad, retos y problemas, y mostrar disposición a participar activamente en los diferentes espacios sociales y políticos, a partir de sólidos principios éticos. Asimismo, se espera que actúen solidariamente, sean responsables con su propia salud y formación, interactúen con las demás personas y con el medio ambiente de forma respetuosa y muestren una actitud crítica ante las injusticias, las violaciones de derechos fundamentales y las imperfecciones del sistema social y político. Una reciente investigación de Eurídice, para mí que soy historiador, reciente, del 2006, Eurídice, cuya responsable ahora en España es mi compañera, es la Red Europea de Información sobre Educación en Europa, considera que la educación para la ciudadanía es un instrumento para que los niños y niñas, jóvenes y jóvenes, se conviertan en ciudadanos y ciudadanas responsables y activos. Entiende que esta competencia incluye el aprendizaje de los derechos y deberes de los ciudadanos y ciudadanas, el respeto por los valores democráticos y por los derechos humanos, y otorga importancia a la solidaridad, la tolerancia y la participación en una sociedad democrática. Sin embargo, a pesar de la aceptación general de estos principios, los estudios realizados en torno a la educación ciudadana y social en el ámbito de la Unión Europea revelan que los Estados miembros no comparten una concepción curricular común. De hecho, esta varía desde la existencia de materias autónomas o su inclusión en el ámbito de las ciencias sociales hasta el carácter transversal que se le concede en algunos sistemas educativos. Por lo general, bajo el concepto ciudadanía responsable, o también educación para la ciudadanía, Eurídice engloba aspectos relacionados con el conocimiento y el ejercicio de los derechos y responsabilidades cívicas. Igualmente, todos los países asocian el concepto con ciertos valores. Entre ellos se incluyen la democracia, la dignidad humana, la libertad, el respeto por los derechos humanos, la tolerancia, la igualdad, el respeto a la ley, la justicia social, la solidaridad, la responsabilidad, la lealtad, la cooperación, la participación y el desarrollo espiritual, moral, cultural, mental y físico. En general, todos los países están de acuerdo en que todos estos valores son esenciales para atender el concepto de ciudadanía responsable. En España, las competencias sociales y cívica se van a trabajar con esta nueva ley en todas las etapas educativas. Se incluye por primera vez en España el estudio por competencias en el bachillerato, que hasta ahora era una especie como de tierra de nadie, y las competencias sociales y cívicas, donde se trabaja de forma transversal en el conjunto de materias, parece que está de forma concreta vinculada más con las áreas de ciencias sociales y con alguna asignatura concreta, en el caso de la LOE con la educación para la ciudadanía y en el caso de la LOMCE con la educación en valores. Estas competencias social y cívica implican la habilidad y capacidad para utilizar los conocimientos y actitudes sobre la sociedad, entendida como señalado desde diferentes perspectivas, en su concepción dinámica, cambiante y compleja, para interpretar fenómenos y problemas sociales en contextos cada vez más diversificados, elaborar respuestas, tomar decisiones y resolver conflictos, así como para interactuar con otras personas y grupos conforme a normas basadas en el respeto mutuo y en convicciones democráticas. A partir de aquí, quizás sea la parte más novedosa de mi intervención, puesto de lo que voy a hablar, o que vamos a hablar, forma parte de una orden que dimienta aparición, que va a desarrollar la disposición adicional 35ª de la LOMCE, en donde se va a hablar del conjunto de competencias y su relación con el currículum, y yo lo que voy a hacer es, más o menos, presentar, no creo que la redacción final de esta orden sea lo que yo os voy a comentar, pero sí en esencia recogerá, creemos, lo que a continuación pues vamos a señalar. Estas competencias social y cívica, además de incluir acciones a un nivel más cercano o próximo, como he señalado, se trata de aunar el interés por profundizar y garantizar la participación en el funcionamiento democrático de la sociedad, tanto en el ámbito público como en el privado. Preparar a las personas para ejercer la ciudadanía democrática y participar plenamente en la vida cívica y social gracias al conocimiento de conceptos y estructuras sociales y políticas y al compromiso de participación activa y democrática. Esta competencia requiere que el alumno conozca, en general, las experiencias colectivas y la organización y funcionamiento del pasado y el presente de las sociedades, la riqueza y pluralidad de la sociedad española en sus diferentes contextos de las comunidades autónomas y europeas, su pasado histórico, los elementos que son comunes y los que son diferentes, así como los espacios y territorios en que se desarrolla la vida de los grupos humanos en general. Comprender y entender la realidad social del mundo en el que se vive, sus conflictos y las motivaciones de los mismos, sus logros y sus problemas, es condición necesaria para comprometerse personal y colectivamente en su mejora, participando así de manera activa en relación con todo ello. Además, esta competencia permite desarrollar las destrezas necesarias para identificar problemas en su entorno, analizar y reflexionar sobre sus experiencias personales y sociales, obtener, interpretar y valorar información relevante, elaborar propuestas que, en definitiva, le permitan desenvolverse con responsabilidad y autonomía creciente y crítica para vivir en sociedad y al mismo tiempo poder transformarla profundizando los valores democráticos, ejemplo que hoy hemos visto en esta sala. Asimismo, incluye habilidades para participar plenamente en la vida cívica y requiere asumir, construir y defender dichos valores. Las competencias social y cívica tienen dos ámbitos. Por un lado, la competencia social, relacionada con el bienestar personal y colectivo, que exige entender el modo en que las personas pueden procurarse un estado de salud física y mental óptimo, tanto para ellas mismas como para sus familias y para su entorno social próximo, y saber cómo un estilo de vida saludable puede contribuir a ello. Como han señalado los profesores Zautra en sus diferentes estudios, la capacidad de inteligencia social implica una capacidad de reflexión entre nosotros mismos, que combinada con una mayor comprensión de nuestro mundo social y una mayor motivación hacia la capacidad empática, implican la evitación de conductas antisociales, así como la capacidad de estar más en contacto con los demás, aumentando las capacidades personales y el bienestar psicológico de las personas. Para poder participar plenamente en los ámbitos social e interpersonal es fundamental comprender y analizar de manera crítica los códigos de conducta, como nos han enseñado los profesores Zautra, y los usos generalmente aceptados en las distintas sociedades y entornos, así como sus tensiones y procesos de cambio. La misma importancia tiene conocer los conceptos básicos relativos al individuo, al grupo, a la organización del trabajo, la igualdad y la no discriminación entre hombres y mujeres y entre distintos grupos étnicos o culturales, la sociedad y la cultura. Asimismo, es esencial comprender las dimensiones intercultural y socioeconómico de las sociedades y percibir las identidades culturales y nacionales como un proceso sociocultural dinámico y cambiante en interacción con el resto del mundo en un contexto de creciente globalización. Los elementos fundamentales de esta competencia incluyen la capacidad de comunicarse de una manera constructiva en distintos entornos sociales y culturales, como hoy hemos visto aquí, mostrar tolerancia, expresar y comprender puntos de vista diferentes, negociar sabiendo inspirar confianza y sentir empatía. Me he quedado con una frase de la exposición del profesor Zautra que decía que lo difícil era convencer al otro sin ponerle nada. Parece que esta competencia va a ir por este lado. Las personas deben ser capaces de gestionar una actitud y comportamiento de respeto a las diferencias, expresado de manera constructiva. Esta competencia se basa en la actitud de colaboración, en la seguridad en uno mismo, eso es muy importante, y en la integridad y honestidad. Por otro lado, existe otro ámbito que es la competencia cívica, que se basa en el conocimiento crítico de los conceptos de democracia, de justicia, de igualdad, etcétera, etcétera. El pleno respeto de los derechos humanos, incluida la igualdad, como base de la democracia, etcétera. No voy a entrar en detalles como he hecho con la otra, porque quizás la más vinculada es la competencia social. Para finalizar, porque el tiempo apremia, no quiero ser excesivamente pesado, y creo que con esto alcanzo mi media horita. Las competencias social y cívica preparan para participar de una manera eficaz, activa y constructiva en la vida social y profesional. E incorpora formas de comportamiento individual que capacitan a las personas para convivir en una sociedad cada vez más plural, dinámica, cambiante y compleja para relacionarse con los demás, cooperar, comprometerse y afrontar los conflictos, y proponer activamente perspectivas de afrontamiento, así como tomar perspectiva, desarrollar la percepción del individuo en relación a su capacidad para influir en lo social y elaborar argumentaciones basadas en evidencias. Adquirir esta competencia supone ser capaz de ponerse en el lugar del otro, aceptar las diferencias, ser tolerante y respetar los valores, las creencias, las culturas y las historias personales y colectivas de los demás. Es decir, aunar lo individual y lo social, lo privado y lo público, en pos de soluciones constructivas de los conflictos y problemas de la sociedad democrática. Muchas gracias.